Hello, readers and friends. Today is Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. Thank you for joining me once again. In recent chats, I've shared about two remarkable women in my life. Women I love and who love me. They are easy for me to love. There is no expectation and no fault. We know we are responsible for our own actions, and I am linked with these women even if I don't see, hear, or connect with them for years. Somewhere along the line, we made a pact that we were important to each other. There's not a lot of people I've made that pact with. I made that pact with my son, who died when he was 31. My longest relationships are now with Rini, who I met 50 years ago, Louise, who I've known for 41 years, and AC, who I've been married to for 38 years. I'm grateful to have these relationships because they balance out the most complicated relationship I have had. This relationship adversely leaks into my marriage with the person I hold in highest regard for his care, his sense of humor, and his stubbornness to stay the course with me. Between 1974 and 1976, Adrienne Rich wrote a collection of poems called 21 Love Poems. The following is an excerpt from poem number 8. The woman who cherished her suffering is dead. I am her descendant. I love the scar tissue she handed on to me. But I want to go on from here with you, fighting the temptation to make a career of pain. And this intimately describes the undercurrents that surface today, destroying the quality of my life. When I first read this, I thought of my mother, who gave up at age 65 and died 20 years later, still embittered because we didn't get it right. We, her children, could not read her mind. We could not interpret her longing, her frustration, and her rage. We could not fix her. She is not who I want to grow up to be. I want to go on from here with you, fighting the temptation to make a career of pain. I wrote about promising my 17-year-old self that I wouldn't have any regret, so I've made a lot of choices, made a lot of mistakes. My mother was an angry woman whose rage festered internally, perhaps causing her health problems in later life. She penalized us, her quartet of children, pitting us against each other, gossiping about us with whomever was her current favorite. She told us secrets, and she told us not to tell anyone. I am good at keeping secrets, especially my own. My mother would caution us as we walked out the front door. Don't trust anyone. Don't tell anybody who we are. And by this she meant that we were to present a facade of contented, well-cared for children who loved our parents above all others. And I despair to discover that despite the work, the self-care I have learned to do, some part of me can go on autopilot. I have not resisted that temptation. I have given into it. I have wallowed in it. The unholy breaking of promises to myself. I, who should be more loyal to myself than anyone. Isn't that what my mother taught me? AC sometimes irritates me the most. Sometimes I hate him the most. Sometimes I ignore him the most. I have gone absolutely apeshit crazy around here many times, and I wonder, why doesn't he leave me? He is the only person I go on autopilot with. I forget that I want to go on from here with you, fighting the temptation to make a career of pain. Sometimes I feel so much rage, which is anger, which is pain. Full cycle here. My thesis was about the racism and classism, often unconscious, of the staff towards their clients of domestic abuse. One of the themes is the cycle of violence. In all honesty, I cannot even say I'm cognizant of any buildup of rage. I just go from 0 to 60 in a nanosecond. And AC gets the brunt of this personality change that occurs, where I am foaming at the mouth, screeching like a banshee, screaming vilely. I am aware of the irony that my mother was passive aggressive in her rage. She did not speak. Instead, she was an expert at these deep, pitiful sighs that could fill us up with guilt. She sat, tapping her fingers, exhaling noisily, deeply disappointed, shaking her head. My siblings and I would assume that one of us had done something terrible to make her so unhappy, and we'd compete with each other trying to fix her. Translate this into making her love us. My father, on the other hand, took his long walks, watched his old westerns, and generally stayed out of her way unless she managed to provoke him. And thanks to therapy, I proudly found my voice as a young woman. I have no trouble expressing myself, even if that means I am incoherently screaming about why the kitchen scissors got misplaced or what we're going to watch next on TV. I can express myself. I truly dislike that offensive, hideous woman, me, who makes her appearance, and I am powerless. I want to forget I am capable of such atrocious cruelty to another human being, mainly AC. William Jonas Barclay says, "Forgetting is an involuntary act. The more you want to leave something behind you, the more it follows you." When my son died, AC and my sister wouldn't let me see his body. They were adamant that I would not want to remember him this way. I am grateful for their wisdom. What I do have are memories of 20 years, my mother sitting with her hands clasped, waiting. I'm not sure exactly how this happened. I can speculate, patch together observations and conversations, and craft my own story about my mother. For a long time, my mother was the most wonderful, capable person I knew. I loved her, admired her. She was at once loving and hypercritical. My sisters and I were either too fat or too thin, and I especially was always chastised for not coloring my hair. My brother, on the other hand, was told his hair was too long. She never said, "Wait till your dad gets home." In our house, her word was the law, and my father always deferred to her from meal planning to discipline. My mother was active in San Francisco's Nihon Machi, or Japan time. Several times a week, she and her cronies would gather at the local shop, sipping coffee and sharing sweets. They cheerfully greeted everyone who passed. They laughed and gossiped amongst themselves, bragging about their children's latest successes. She was sought after for her talent to knot obis, the broad, intricate silk sash worn with the kimono. And she had always been a talented seamstress, and she had an amazing gift. I would show her a dress on TV or in a magazine. She would figure out that pattern and sew it up for me. She was a great cook. She would have a dish at a restaurant, close her eyes as if identifying all the ingredients, then duplicate the recipe at home. When she turned 65, all that stopped. Sorry. When she turned 65, all that stopped. She stopped going out to meet her friends. She stopped cooking. She had long ago stopped sewing. I felt she had stopped doing her life and was now depending on her children to do for her. By then, my siblings and I were invested in our own careers, relationships, our own lives. We lived out of town, out of state, and like most families these days, we were scattered. We only went home on holidays and birthdays. That wasn't what she wanted. That wasn't what she had planned, although she never gave voice to her plans. She wanted us to take care of her. AC and I brought my parents down here, moving them into our mother-in-law unit. She was too cold or too hot. She was not feeling well. She wanted. What we did was not good enough for her. My inner voice began to interpret this as, I am not good enough. And the truth is, I am good enough. I am enough. I'm accomplished. I'm curious. I enjoy learning new things. From the outside looking in, I have a wonderful life, and my internal life is just as grand most of the time. When my mother died at 85, still waiting, still embittered, still keeping her secrets, I felt a sense of relief. The night before she passed, she stared intently into the beyond, arms outstretched, her lips moving, although I couldn't hear her. I knew she saw her family and friends, those who had died before her, waiting for her. I hoped my son was one of them. She turned to me asking, "Can I go home now?" I assured her she could, that we were all grown up, she'd done a great job, and she could go home. I have absolved myself from guilt, but what remains is the legacy my mother left me. Rage stemming from frustration, disappointment, hopelessness. I don't know what caused those feelings in her, but they lurk in me. I have my own rage, so why have I internalized hers? I don't know. My choice is to know when the rage erupts, to look at it, to feel it, and not cram it back down. I give it sunlight, air. As with forgiveness, I release it again and again. And I apologize to AC a lot. So, here's a little bit more about this writer. Thank you for being here today. I'm always interested in your reflections as well. You can make a comment here, or if you prefer something more private, message me on Instagram or Facebook. And let me remind you that YouTube counts everything that happens here. And showing that we have a growing following is huge. So if you'll give this video a thumbs up and click that red subscribe button, that would be a great help. For new readers or folks who need to fill out their Walkerville collection, the address of my Amazon page is in the description. All the Walkerville books are available there in both Kindle and print editions. So please do tell your friends, write a review, post something on your social media. Of course, the direct link for next Wednesday's live chat is in the description as well. Hope to see you then, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining me.